today we are talking to Taylor, and I think we'll probably do this intro like we typically do, which is after this.
Yeah.
So Taylor Deline, first question, always the same. If you could go back 15 years, what would your past self think of the work you're doing today?
Okay, I have to do some quick math. How old was I 15 years ago? 13?
I was going to say 17.
Okay.
No, yeah.
I'm 28.
17.
28 minus 15.
Nope, 13.
Okay.
Other way.
There we go. I just think that she would just be so excited about everything that I'm doing. And I've always said, and I don't remember where I read this or saw it, but it doesn't necessarily matter the speed at which you're going, but the direction. Mm-hmm. And I think she would just be really excited about the direction that I'm going. Because I think present Taylor can definitely wish I was further along. Mm-hmm. I tend to be the hardest critic on myself about, I want to have already done this and this and that. But I think that 15 years ago, she would just be so excited about the direction and that all of these different passions that we've acquired over 28 years of life are really getting to be put into play in like personal life and professional life all at once.
Hence the we.
Yeah.
Personal and professional,
Yeah.
Taylor.
They are separate.
No, I love that. It's like you haven't opened the final door yet, but like you probably shouldn't have. You're only 28.
Yeah.
But you've opened the doors in the right direction to get you to that.
Yeah, and I think I've always been the kind of person I've liked so many things and I've enjoyed so many different avenues. And so it was always hard for me when people are like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, well, I would love to do something with this or that. I also like this sometimes, maybe a sprinkle of that. And so seeing how it's all panned together where these different things can all converge has been really sweet.
Yeah.
That's easy to say, but we have heard that you want to be First Lady of the United States.
Yes, my dream job, I've gone on the record, my dream job is to be First Lady of the United States. And I think that people think it's just like a quippy, like, conversation starter, or that it's just something that you would say for, like, a reaction. But, like, genuinely, I do believe that I would really enjoy it, and I think that I would be really good at it.
You would make big impact, knowing you.
I think it would be really cool to just be given, and you have to earn it, obviously, but to have this platform and to be able to use it in so many different ways. And I mean, not to brag or anything, but I have read every memoir available by any past First Lady, and I've read a lot of literature on
So
First
you're
Ladies
ready.
who didn't, write memoirs.
You're educated. So another dream of yours when you were young, possibly, I don't know the answer to this question yet, this could be a leading question, was being on stage. Tell us a little bit about that dream.
Yeah, so I've been on stage in one capacity or another since I was 6. And it was my grandfather who told my parents that he thought that I would do well in like a summer camp on stage or something. And so they put me into a summer camp and we performed at like the local small town fair. And I had so much just like enthusiasm and natural something that they saw that the people who put on the program came to my parents and were like, hey, like, we would love if she would come and audition for one of our main stage programs. This is kind of what that looks like. And I think just at the time, I was just happy to be doing what I loved. I did not know that that was kind of abnormal for that offer to come along. But yeah, I've been doing performing arts, specifically musical theater, since I was 6. And I say that I'm retired right now, but if the right role came along and I had the time, I would love to get back on stage. And I think that the biggest change is that now when I'm like on stage, it's mostly as myself, which is a really big pivot from growing up. I was playing these roles, and that's really, for me, easy to dissociate and separate. But then to go on stage as yourself feels so much more vulnerable. Like, I think a lot of people think that playing a lead role in a musical sounds so scary. And to me, I would do that any day over going up and being Taylor and like speaking my truths and being vulnerable about my stories. And so it's been a really cool pivot the last 2 years to start being on stage as myself and talking about rest and mental health and, you know, going to these conferences and getting opportunities. But it definitely is a different preparation than being on stage as like a child actor. And yeah, so I do love being on stage. And before it was more for entertainment purposes, and now it's a little bit more for educational, but I'm not scared of the lights or the mics by any means.
So we're talking about childhood dreams or desires. What about Make-A-Wish? Tell us about that and how there's a story there.
Yeah, so I must have been in middle school or high school when my mom first found out that you could get involved with Make-A-Wish. We lived about an hour and a half north of Seattle, so we definitely weren't super close to the city. So some of those opportunities for volunteering required us to drive a bit of a ways to get involved. But she found out that we could go and be a part of these wish makers days where we could like cheer for somebody while they're getting like on an airplane to go to Disneyland, or you could get a list of things that they wanted for their wish bags, and like you could purchase those items and put in little notes. And so we started doing that, and we're kind of wish sponsors, I guess the best way to put it. But I really wanted more, and I wanted to get involved a lot more than that. And so I applied to be like an official volunteer, and I was denied because I wasn't 18, and it just broke my heart. And I genuinely did not understand why I had to be 18 to be a official capacity volunteer for this nonprofit.
How old were you?
I was either a freshman in high school or 8th grade. I was kind of in that.
So like 14.
Yeah.
13,
I
14.
know I wasn't old enough to drive myself
Okay.
anywhere. So
Do you understand now why that rule was put in place?
I guess from like a liability standpoint, it's a little bit
Okay.
tricky. But I also just get excited about youth being involved in anything, because when you have somebody who's under 18 and a youth, and you can spark an interest in philanthropy or entrepreneurship, or even just witnessing somebody's story that's different than their own, I think that's super powerful under the age of 18. It's not that it's not powerful as an adult, but there's something about talking to somebody and experiencing somebody's story when you're younger that can impact you in a way that you'll never forget, that I think is really unique. So I kind of get it. And then I'm also like, oh, that would have been so cool. So
I know. I was thinking like on a deeper, like that's probably the right answer, liability. I was thinking more on like Make-A-Wish is such a joyful as well as painful experience for everyone involved. And so I was thinking, oh, well, maybe there was part of the organization that figured it might be to protect
I could see that.
kids from just experiencing the pain that's also involved in that experience.
Yeah, that's probably also a consideration. Yeah.
Certain maturity level to make it work.
Being able to like process that like this is life, and you know, we're here to try and make it a little bit better because that's all we can do
At that point,
and
yeah.
should do.
Yeah, I remember when my mom and I went down to Children's Hospital, and they were doing one of their like radio telethons. I don't remember who was sponsoring it. But one of the reasons I was invited to go do that was because I was at the hospital a lot. And so I'm like thinking about that now. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if that was because they knew that I was used to that environment and also had this love for philanthropy at a young age. Or, yeah, it's just funny to think about that protection piece.
Yeah. Okay. Do you remember your first time buying from Kate Spade?
Yeah, I remember even specifically like the first time that my parents bought me a bag versus when I bought my first one,
both.
which is like very separate. Yeah. I just remember walking in and be like, oh, this brand is for me. Like this brand gets me. It's a little bit adult, you know, and has a maturity to it. It has a professionalism to it, but it also has these bright colors and some of these like fun themes. And I was like, I loved that you could buy you could buy like a briefcase there, but you could also buy a purse that was shaped like a soccer ball. I was like, this is great. Like, this is so fun. And so I do remember feeling very at home there. And the first time I went, I was in high school, and I think it was that transition of like young to a little bit more like mature, like adult brands for me. And yeah, I remember the first one I bought myself was, it had like pink leather on the bottom section, and then it was like wicker, and then it had the same pink on top, and it was just like my summer bag. And I think I still have it just like in a memory box somewhere, because it was a big deal to like save that money for my serving job and go and buy that. But I just felt very understood by that brand. And yeah, I just really loved it a lot.
What does dance and movement have to do with mental health?
Wow, I would say so much. Movement specifically, I think we have a lot of science to show us that exercise and movement is vital for the way that our body creates endorphins and dopamine naturally, especially if we're getting outside and getting extra vitamin D. Just 20 minutes outside in sunlight, can give you enough vitamin D to really genuinely boost your spirits. So movement in general, we have a lot of science behind. Dance specifically, for me, was just an art form. And so it's a really creative space to be able to tell a story. And often with mental health, there's not a lot of opportunities for people to tell their story maybe outside of counseling or outside of a therapy session that feels like safe to be that vulnerable. And so I think dance and movement can give a really cool creative space for someone to tell their story, express their emotions that they're experiencing through their mental health journey in a way that maybe feels a little bit more contained and safe. And I know that's what it can be for me. I can listen and connect to a song, and it's so fun to be able to go and choreograph something that gets out the emotions and connects to it on a deeper level. It's like creating a layer cake a little bit. It's like one layer is appreciation for the actual song and the music, and then you can add this movement level. And yeah, it can be very powerful, and it's not necessarily for everyone, dance, but I would say that movement absolutely has to do with your mental health, because it's a way to connect your body to the ground that you're standing on. At the end of the day, like, we all need to be reminded that we're planted and we're here and there's purpose, and to just ground ourselves. And movement is a really beautiful way to thank your body for what it can do today. And I think that's something that's really powerful. It's just to remind yourself of that.
What's your favorite song that you created a dance for?
Oh, gosh. Well, in a musical theater sense, I choreographed a number to Bend and Snap from Legally Blonde. That was very fun.
Obsessed.
And it was really complicated, but super fun. And then from a like lyrical contemporary mental health standpoint, I'm blanking on what it's called, but it's Slide Away by Miley Cyrus, I think is what it's called. And it's about like leaving like a place or a relationship or situation that maybe you don't understand why you need to leave, or maybe it's really hard to leave, but you have to do it for yourself. And that one was, that's a fun number. And I don't think I'll ever forget it. Like, it's like in my body, Yeah.
You'll have to teach us after this recording.
For sure.
I want to see Ken do that.
Me too.
Most people do not.
Me too. Especially since it's lyrical and contemporary. I don't know if Ken can move
right
like
up
that.
his alley, I think. So in your nonprofit, Held Hope, which we're going to talk about more later, you focus on mental health for high school and college students. What critical moments in your life do you think started to kind of cement your passion for this topic?
Yeah, I think mental health was something that I didn't necessarily have language for growing up. My mom, I'm so grateful, was the kind of mom that always said everyone needs therapy, whether they realize it or not. And she was kind of ahead of her time in that way, that she really always encouraged my brother and I that was something normal and necessary, but we didn't necessarily use the words mental health necessarily attached to it. But for me, it was when I was going into my sophomore year of college, and I had just come back from a Disney internship, and I just was so off. Like, I could tell in my body and my mind that I was not functioning in a capacity that was sustainable. And through my own mental health journey, I learned that there was so much language and science behind it all that I just felt like if I had known when I was younger, it could have saved me like so much grief and trauma. And so it's just very interesting because a lot of the beginning of my mental health journey was looking back, and you kind of look back at your childhood and your adolescence, and you can see these different markers and these points. And you just think to yourself, like, wow, there was so much happening there that I didn't realize or know. And so that sophomore year, when I was going through that journey, was when I kind of became aware of mental health as a concept that really connected your mind, body, spirit, everything in a way that was super important. And I thought it was at that time undervalued and like we didn't learn about it in high school. Like I can tell you in my health class, like we learned what ADHD was, but it's the boy who can't sit still, or you learn what PTSD is, but it's like the soldier who comes home from war. And that's just such a simplistic way of describing those, you know, those diagnoses. And so to grow up and start to gain separate education from that was really powerful.
What do we underestimate then about young people?
That they can handle so much more than we give them credit for. And I don't mean handle like an experience or handle a trauma, but I mean like we can explain to them in terms that we might think are too mature, too confusing to understand. We don't have to have every answer. Like if a high schooler or a middle schooler comes to me and asks me a question about, you know, trauma or like PTSD, there's an age appropriate answer that you can give them in a way that educates them and informs them, and doesn't put them at a deficit to understanding their own mind and body. And I think from particularly the parents in the world that I grew up in, like there's just a lot of protection, and I can imagine that, like wanting to protect your kids from like the world and these topics. And it is a lot, like even like you brought up about, you know, like the Make-A-Wish, like wanting to protect kids from seeing other kids dying. Like that's like a harsh reality. But I think at the end of the day, like kids can handle so much more than we give them credit for. And they understand so much more than we give them credit for.
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah, they're in tune. How has rest changed your perspective of the world?
Yeah, I mean, rest literally saved my life. Like I mentioned, that sophomore year, I decided to take a semester off of school, which was its own really tricky decision because I attached my own assumptions to that and what I grew up thinking was certain, you know, failures and markers and things, which is just now looking back, it seems so silly, but in the moment it was true and it was my experience. But rest was always forced for me. Like I would end up in the hospital with a kidney stone because I needed to rest. I would end up in the hospital with exhaustion or like with a severe like pulmonary function issue, you know, all of these things because I wasn't resting well. And so rest was always forced until it got to a point where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And my level of burnout and exhaustion was so high that it was affecting my mental and physical body. And so after kind of coming out of that time off school, I really learned that rest was not something to be forced, but needed to just be implemented as a regular practice.
You mentioned rest well in there. What do you mean by, what's the difference between rest and resting well?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is looking at what you need and how to fulfill it in a way that is going to be most effective. So for example, I've said, like, if you work with your hands, rest with your mind. And if you work with your mind, rest with your hands. So if you have a really, like, if you work at, you know, as an attorney, like you're using your brain a lot during the day, you're looking at a computer, you're reading documents, you're ideal rest might not be going home and reading a book. Like you've been reading all day, your brain already hurts. Like for you, that might look like going for a 3-mile walk, you know, so working with your mind, resting with your hands, and vice versa. Like for someone like my dad in construction, like he doesn't want to come home and go like necessarily go garden because he's been doing construction all day. And so for him, it could be looking more like reading the newspaper, you know, with a cup of tea or something like that. So, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with like binging a TV show. Like I love to go back and watch Gilmore Girls when it starts to become fall. But sitting down and watching TV is not going to spark you necessarily creatively, and it's not necessarily going to help you use your hands by cooking a new recipe. And so resting well to me just looks like listening to your body and what you need at that time, and then creating a space to put that into action.
And then on the other side of resting well, how is coffee an important part of your routine?
Oh, I mean, I love, like, for me, coffee is another, similarly to dance, it is a little bit of an art form. I think that might be just growing up in the Pacific Northwest and working at a coffee shop for so long. But I love like making a new recipe, you know, or kind of like playing with different flavor profiles or ingredients. So for me, it's a way to kind of creatively use my mind and my hands. And I will say though, I don't know if it's the older I get or I don't know where it all comes together, but I do drink a lot less coffee now than I did 6 years ago because I did see that it was increasing my anxiety. And so I listened to my body and said, perhaps we have 1 cup of coffee a day instead of multiple. So I think coffee has a really great place in my rest regimen because it is a creative outlet for me, but it's not something that I'm drinking as consistently as I used to.
Yeah, you could get into herbal teas.
I could,
but I won't.
I don't think I will.
Great idea.
I've tried. This is going to sound so silly, but I don't like things that taste like the earth. And so a lot of teas to me taste too much like the earth.
Yeah.
Well, maybe take that as a challenge.
Yes, I do like, there's some black teas that I really like and a couple of like more fruity teas that I can do as an iced tea in the summer, but.
Got it. Okay, so moving to your org, Held Hope, your nonprofit. When did you realize you needed to start Held Hope?
Yeah, so my senior year of college, we were in the summer, and my friend and I found out that Kate Spade had died by suicide. And it was a very instigating event for us because we felt so connected to her and her story and her brand as somebody who was outwardly all about sparkles and polka dots and this brand of positivity and optimism, that there was something secretly, you know, behind closed doors that she was fighting with this illness. And we just felt very connected to that as two people who had a very similar story of outwardly being one way and then having this personal secret battle on the inside. And so it just ignited something in us that made us want to take some action. And at the time, that action looked like wanting to do a fundraiser. So we had the idea that we would kind of rally the troops in our different communities and circles and collect designer handbags and sell those handbags in a charity fundraiser and then donate that money to some sort of organization that already existed that maybe did mental health work with college-age students, since that was what we were at the time. And it was upon reflecting on that idea that we realized there wasn't necessarily a organization that existed specifically to remove the financial barrier or to quicken the process for college-age students to get assistance and get help. And that's when we decided that perhaps we needed to begin an organization that didn't yet exist in that market.
And so to do that, you obviously had to think about raising money. I'm curious, is this still just about raising money, or kind of how has your perspective changed there?
Yeah, I think that money is a means to a goal for us in the way that we have a couple main goals. The immediate goal that we are currently actively working on is removing that financial barrier. So we do need finances in order to be able to pay for co-pays of students or help them get connected to an out-of-network provider, for example. But it's also for our long-term goals. In the long term, in the long run, the next 5 to 10 years, we really hope to have a physical space. And rent is not cheap, nor is owning a space. And so for us, we have this long-term vision that does require quite a bit of fundraising so that we can have this end goal of being able to not only serve the high school and college age populations with free and low cost services, but we can also introduce free and low cost services to students who are trying to get their master or doctoral level degrees to be able to serve communities with their mental health services, social workers, counselors, psychologists, things like that.
One of the things that you've talked about is toxic positivity. Tell us what that means to you and what is its cost?
Yeah, toxic positivity is one of those things that, well, first of all, the word toxic gets thrown around a lot more in the zeitgeist now than I think it ever has. And so because it's a buzzword, sometimes I think it does lose its potency. And so toxic positivity is basically when you use positivity as a coping mechanism. It's a way to not experience the full brevity of an experience, or just to, like I said, be a coping mechanism so that if, something happens to you and you automatically flip it on its head to make it seem like a positive experience, you're not being honest and authentic about the experience. You're not letting yourself feel that you might be sad or might be angry because it feels like those emotions shouldn't be what you should be experiencing at that time. But in the long run, it's toxic because it literally does affect your physical and mental health. It's toxic because it enters your body, it enters your mind in a way that will have negative effects on your health. And when I think of the word toxic, that's what I think of. If I consume a toxic chemical, it's going to physically affect me mentally, physically in a negative way. And so with toxic positivity, it's being positive to the point that it starts to negatively affect your body and your mind. It really separates the reality of the situation in a way that just in the long run is not going to be conducive to healing and to honesty. It might feel like it's a good in the moment Band-Aid, but in the long run it's toxic because...
So in this context, you're talking about toxic to the positive quote unquote person as opposed to toxic to others they're interacting with.
Yeah, exactly. And it can go both ways. So it's intrinsic and then it's also going outwardly. I mean, if somebody comes to me and they tell me about an experience they have, and I immediately try to put a positive spin on it, that's not allowing them the space that they need as well. If Doni came to me and was experiencing a loss of a parent, for example, and I was like, well, they're in a better place. Sometimes that's not what people need to hear, and we experienced a close family loss when I was pretty young. And I remember my mom at a very young age, telling me people will say things like that because they think that it's helping. But in that moment, you don't care if your loved one's in a better place. You want them to be there and just being like, what do you need? I'm here with you. This is hard. Leaning into that piece is really, really important to allow the weight of a situation be fully experienced.
So I know you have a tendency to do this or have had a tendency to do this. What are some of the ways today, having more vocabulary or just education on this concept that you are able to kind of get yourself out of that mindset and really process and feel and heal when you need to?
Yeah, historically, I definitely was even the friend who would get into conflict with somebody and immediately try to either avoid it, put a positive spin on it, act like things were okay when maybe they weren't. And relationally, that's just not going to be helpful for growth. It's not going to build relationship over time. And so I think one of the biggest things for me is being able to hold two things at once, being able to hold grief and joy, being able to hold frustration alongside love, and those are things that I think historically in my past, I felt like I could either feel one or the other. Like I had to choose to either love someone or be frustrated with them, or to choose joy or to sit in the grief. And to me, the idea of sitting in a grief didn't seem helpful. It seemed harder. And why would I choose the hard thing when I could choose the easier, happier thing? And what it really comes down to in the end is exactly what, we said, is that's where it starts to affect your body and your mind in a toxic way. And as well as just for those around you who may or may not be going through the same thing. If I'm not being honest about my experience, then that's telling people, especially younger than me, that I'm doing life with, that know what I'm going through. It's telling them that they can't be honest with me about their experiences either. So, yeah.
The emotions you bring up, joy, love, frustration, grief, like those are all such big, overwhelming feelings. So I think it's interesting for you to say being able to hold both of those like opposites at the same time. I'm going to challenge myself to do that in some of the relationships I have. Yeah. We
contain multitudes, and even though it can be complex, we're complex human beings, and that's part of what makes us beautiful.
Yeah. We got big brains.
Yeah. Big brains.
So you're working a lot with younger people. From your perspective, do they have a different view of mental health because of their generation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a really big piece of that, one of the pros of social media is that there is this context.
There is a pro?
There is a pro. Yeah, there's a context for learning that didn't exist in my generation. They have access through TikTok and Instagram a little bit, but they really are on TikTok a lot more than they are in some of the other apps. But they are able to see educational materials from really great nonprofits and from other people with similar experiences who are their age and their school, maybe across the country. And maybe they're introduced to that creator because the creator is doing a silly dance, but then they're also talking about their anxiety or their OCD. And so they have learned the language, and they've learned about mental health in a way that is very honest, which is a pro. The con that comes with that is that we also have young people self-diagnosing themselves based off something that, oh, this person experiences this the same way I do, therefore I must also have anxiety, OCD, PTSD. Which also, everything can swing both ways. So there's the pro that they're being introduced to these topics and these symptoms, these experiences at a younger age, and they're able to process them in a pretty efficient way. But the con of that is that they are sometimes misdiagnosing themselves. And at the end of the day, they do need to see a professional and not diagnose themselves through a TikToker.
Which pivots nicely into the next question, which is about access to mental health care for high school and college students. What are some of the challenges there?
I think one of the biggest things is just the way that our healthcare system works as far as, there's so many pieces that go with it, but the access that they're experiencing is really similar to that of a college age student or even, people our age, which is that often you have to see a family practice doctor to get, a referral out to see a counselor, to whom has to be in your network. And if they're out of network, it's $200 a visit. So there's just a lot of pieces in our healthcare system that don't necessarily move quickly to get somebody care. And you shouldn't have to feel like you have to take your student to the ER to get them to be able to see a counselor or a social worker immediately. That's not going to be the most efficient system. So I would say that's one of the biggest things with access to care. Also, just not every school district has the funds to have an on-campus social worker or an on-campus counselor. often you'll hear like guidance counselors. Those people are a little bit more equipped to help you figure out maybe some career path options or look into schools, but they're not mental health counselors typically. And so the funding in schools also is a piece of that that we see.
Mm-hmm.
Your focus that we've talked about is helping with the co-pays or with the out-of-network fees. But there's another part of what you're doing, which is the hours for clinical. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so something that we would love to do long term. It's not something we're actively able to pursue just because of, we're about a year old and still kind of up and running. But we really have this idea that it can be a full ecosystem in the end, where we could have a physical building where someone who is trying to get their clinical license for therapy could come and they could have their supervision hours paid for. So, for example, my co-founder, she had to pay a large amount of money for every clinical supervision hour, where somebody went through with her, talked about every week a couple hours and was like, what are you seeing? How are you responding? What do your chart notes look like? And those hours cost a lot of money. And so we have the idea that people who've been in the industry a long time, who have the ability to be supervisors, to give those clinical supervision hours, could come and donate and volunteer their time to students who need the clinical hours, and they would be able to do that for free. So instead of the cost of entry to the profession being so high with these supervision hours, then they would be able to do it for free as well. And then our students can receive services for free. So a volunteer ecosystem in which there's services to be received on both ends of the system.
Can you tell us a little bit about your co-founder?
Yeah. So Savannah and I met my sophomore year, her junior year at university. And we definitely have the perfect balance, like in our friendship and our working relationship, of kind of different sides of the brain. So I really focus on a lot of the business and the marketing and the community relationships and building out programs and services on the front end. And she does a lot more of the clinical side. So her degrees are specifically for mental health counseling. She is a clinical mental health counselor. She runs her own private practice in Boise, Idaho. And so she has that piece, and she connects us to a lot of great companies and resources for kind of the clinical side of things.
Yeah, you guys sound like a good match.
Yeah, her plus my board president, who's a clinical social worker for Mercer Island School District. The three of us make a pretty good trio.
How do you think that your work so far with Held Hope has changed or altered your own life choices?
I mean, the biggest thing is time. It's definitely changed the way that I look at time, because if I had it my way, I would have 20 more hours in a day, and they could all go toward Held Hope. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's really taught me to walk the talk.
I like that.
To be able to, if I'm going around and talking to high schoolers about, these social media boundaries, I need to also have those boundaries for myself, which can be hard because social media is a part of my work, in order to find donors or to let students know about our services. Like, I'm on social media creating a reel, creating a TikTok post, but that's exhausting as well, and you're comparing yourself to other nonprofits. And so a lot of the same things that the students are experiencing that I'm giving advice toward, I have to tell myself. Same with rest. It's shown and reminded me that I need to rest as well, and that I can't pour from an empty cup. I need to take the time to fill up my cup, because if I'm constantly pouring out and trying to serve and give and give and give, at one point there won't be anything to give anymore. And then the people who volunteer for us or who I work with at my day job and things like that, like, they're going to get so little of me that I can't be the best version of myself for anyone. So really, like, resting and practicing what I preach has been a big thing. And also just that we need this. Like, if anything, I've realized that this is something that is needed. At first, we had really questioned if we were an organization that needed to exist if there were already enough mental health organizations. And the more that I talk to people and the more I meet the people that we impact and the people who want to be volunteering with us, the more I see just such a fire for this. And every time there is a news story that breaks our hearts and people are calling for changes in the mental health community, I know that we're moving towards something very important. And there's a big difference between an outcry for mental health care and meeting that outcry with action. And we're just trying to be a tiny piece of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
One of our favorite questions is, what if? Talk to us about what the social implications could be when you're dreaming.
Yeah, the big what if is that we could make impact to the way that mental health is integrated into the medical systems that exist and the educational systems that exist in the United States. It would be so amazing if we get to a point where we're able to talk about how policies are being changed on a state and federal level and what's being required of health insurances to provide at a baseline level, what's in schools as part of curriculums, without having to spend tons of specific grant money, just the baseline level of care for mental health that we have for so many other things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the big what if would be having a self-sustaining ecosystem of volunteers and funding that allows us to help high school and college age students, and then also these master's and doctoral level students as well, while simultaneously being able to affect policy. I think that would be a really amazing end result for our organization.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on Held Hope now, or should we move to upcoming initiatives?
Yeah, I think we can talk about initiatives.
Initiatives?
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about college campus initiatives. And tell us a little bit about this postcard you got going on.
Yeah, so one of the very first things that we thought would be a cool way to introduce ourselves essentially to these college towns is to create a resource that we could pass out, take to restaurants and bars and sororities and fraternities and put on campus that just says, hey, this is who we are, what we offer, and here are some resources that already exist in your community. So it's basically just like a 5x7 card that is similar to a postcard, and it's going to have all of the emergency resources listed in that specific college town. So for example, that could be Pullman, Washington, Cheney, Washington, Bellingham, Seattle, and it would have that specific city's resources. That could also include a massage therapist who is trauma informed, or a gym for people who need some more accessibility. So it's not just hotlines. It's not just counselors. There's a lot of holistic mental health resources in each community that we wanted to highlight. So it has that. And then it also has a QR code on the front that they can scan to immediately be taken to our financial aid application. So here's who we are. Here's what's already in your area. Here's a financial, QR code if you need it. And the idea was that students could take these, they could put them on their refrigerator, and when their friends and family are coming over, that it's just something that they see next to the 27 save the dates they have for the weddings that they have coming up, and that it could be something that just floats through these towns as an accessibility option and we're here, reach out.
Very cool. Are you thinking about making one for UW? I know you're a big Wazoo fan.
Yeah, they're last on the list. I'm just kidding. I will say that UW is further on our list just because Seattle is so vast.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little bit easier to find and connect with all of the organizations and people in Ellensburg than it is Seattle. Right. So yeah, UW is definitely on our list, but go Cougs.
Go Huskies.
So if you've listened to this at all, and both of our listeners probably have, there's a lot of great causes out there and some amazing people doing stuff. how do people decide where to give their resources, their time, their money, their attention?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just like where you feel called, where your passions lie. There's so many places that you could give all of those things to. I think if you have a high schooler who is interested in volunteering, or a college student, like encourage them and do it together, because a lot of times high schoolers, since they're under 18, can't do things on their own. Ask like, hey, like, is there a cause that you feel passionate about? High schoolers are very passionate these days. They want to take up a lot of causes. So I'd say like ask your high schoolers, ask your middle schoolers, like what they're passionate about and where they like to get involved, and do it together. Like make it a family affair. That's one big thing. But yeah, I think it just comes down to like what each person's called to. Because if I get overwhelmed. There's so many places asking for, donations and your time. And I switch mine up every year, like around the new year, actually. I'll kind of look and just be like, oh, like who have I learned about in this last year and what am I interested in and things like that. But yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So I know you have a fundraiser this fall.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this fall, we pivoted a little bit. We were going to do a big event, but now we are kind of launching our Partners in Hope initiative, which is basically founding 50 members, which we are going to just be asking local businesses who we've already been in touch with this last year, as well as individuals, if they want to come on board to be a monthly donor. That could be $5 a month, up to as much a month as you desire. But basically with the founding 50, they get to be featured on our page as one of the founding 50 members that just was there from the beginning, financially supporting us. And there's a lot of perks that come with that, from a newsletter to a welcome box that I am personally very excited about. I love a gift. And so, yeah, we're going to be launching our founding 50 Partners in Hope, which I'm very excited about. One of the hardest pieces with fundraising is having consistency. And so we're really hoping that this creates a consistency and a baseline foundation for us financially. And then when we do big events and when we do other initiatives, those can kind of be additional, but to have a healthy baseline for our operational costs would be fantastic. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.
One of the plans is to offer speaking and workshops.
Yeah.
Tell us what that looks like, who your target is for that.
Yeah.
What it's all about.
Yeah. So as far as speaking engagements go and workshops, one of the things that we think is really important is equipping the community around high schoolers and college age students. It's not just about serving them, but also the communities that support them. So we basically have been able to go to a couple of different local businesses, and we'll sit down with their leadership team and talk about here's how you can support your specific team as far as the anxieties that they might be feeling, or here's how your team can rest well in your specific industry. But we also are really excited with this new school year to be going to a couple of different high schools, and we'll be doing workshops with they have health classes. And so we're going to go to the different lectures for these high school classes in their health course and talk about social media and talk about rest and do some of these kind of boots on the ground workshops. So to answer your question, we can do some like high level, big conference style conversations. We can also do small, intimate classroom workshops, everything from, like I said, like rest, social media, anxiety. We do boundary setting, which I think is really helpful for like high school age students and parents, just talking to like parents about how they can set healthy boundaries while making their student feel respected, and students how to have those conversations with your parents. So lots of different topics. You can kind of see like on our website what we're offering at the time, but we're really excited to just be teaching some real life tools to the people in our communities of how to support themselves and support students as well.
How would businesses or schools reach out? Would they just go to Held Hope's website and inquire there, or is there a different?
Yeah, we have on the website, there's a speaking engagement inquiry box. I believe it's on I think it's on like the About Us, and then looking at like services and resources. There's one that says speaking engagements or workshops. And then if they do that inquiry, then we can even brainstorm together. We've had people come to us and be like, we want to have something, but we don't really know what. And so then we'll do an initial consult call and figure out what the needs of their group are and how we can meet those needs. It's pretty custom DIY at this point.
I know. Those workshops have been really helpful for us in this industry and personal injury because we have, a lot of our staff are working with individuals who are going through trauma.
Yeah.
And they receive our client correspondents, our legal assistants, our paralegals, they receive that trauma. And, as much as, I think we want them and they want to be able to leave that at the office at the end of the day. I think a lot of them take it home. And I think it's important to equip your staff, the people around you with tools and education on how to cope and, in this industry in order to have work here and sustainably, you have to be able to put that stuff, compartmentalize at times. And so it's been very helpful for us to have workshops around the topics you're talking about.
That's amazing that you guys do that. And Ken, I actually have a question for you, for someone who's been in the industry so long. What have you seen be the changing conversation around mental health with attorneys and legal staff? I know that unfortunately the legal field is one that is quite high in substance abuse and depression historically. So what have you seen change in the last 20 years?
I wish that the change was as profound as it's been. It feels like in some ways the legal industry is slow to react, and in some ways that's good. I mean, there's parts of the legal industry that I am glad are a little old school. The changes in ownership, for example, in medical facilities, I'm glad that hasn't come yet to the legal profession. But as far as mental health, I wish there was more change there. I think that there is awareness of it. There's insurance for it that's expensive because I think insurers recognize the risk of doing what we do, and we recognize it. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so heavily investing in this trauma-informed dialogue
Service, care,
that our people can understand what our clients are going through, because our clients are going through maybe one of the worst things in their life when they're talking with us, and it's hard to be empathetic and talking with people that are going through that and not take that home and have it affect your personal life.
And from a business standpoint too, we lose employees who can't deal effectively
See a lot
or
of burnout.
sustainably with, just how heavy it is working with our clients in this industry. And so it's in our best interest, I think personally, Ken and I care about the people on this team, but also from a business standpoint too.
Absolutely.
It is worth the investment to try and equip your people with mental health tools and education and resources.
It's the most empathetic who are usually the best at working with clients that struggle the most because they get so deeply connected to the clients. And so we're working hard on that. We don't have the answers yet.
Yeah, but when we know better, we do better. And the fact that you guys are taking steps to help your people know better it is a huge piece of that. So it really is a slow work in progress to change the culture around mental health. And so, I mean, I even just think of legal TV shows. It looks like this is things always happening. It's so stressful, and that's TV. But the truth of the matter is you are handling things that are a little bit more, take more empathy and high intensity. And so I can only imagine. All
right. What does getting involved in volunteering look like?
Yeah, right now, we don't have a lot of kind of like day-to-day low-level volunteer opportunities just because, like I mentioned, we're about a year old, and unless you are a counselor or a social worker, we don't necessarily have a lot of basic volunteer opportunities. However, I did recently find out about some pretty cool opportunities that I think it's Lumen Field offers, where you can go and like help with like ticketing or working one of the concession booths, and then the money that you would have earned during that time or a percentage of the sales of your booth can be donated to a nonprofit of your choice, which is pretty cool. So if you want to go the next time that your favorite concert is in town, or when the Seahawks are playing, and donate your time there and have them donate the portion of your.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm bummed I can't remember right now. Maybe one of your producers can put in like the show notes how to sign up for that. But there's some cool things like that where if people go and they donate their time and have some fun on a weekend doing something like that, and then the proceeds go to us, that's a huge way to volunteer. It's physical, it's fun, it's different, and things like that help. Also, just getting us connected to the people in your community, honestly, is the biggest way that somebody could help get us connected with your local Mod Pizza who wants to do, a 15% donation,
For sure.
Things like that. And just bringing us into your spaces to have conversations like this, to talk to your attorneys about what it looks like to unplug, things like that. Come talk at your kids' high school about how to have healthy social media boundaries. That's the kind of stuff that's really going to move the needle for us right now.
Love it. So you're fairly new, but looking way into the future and kind of fantasizing a bit. When it's said and done, what do you hope the impact of your organization will have on the industry?
Yeah, just multi-generational healing and multi-generational access. High schoolers will one day be high schoolers who are in high school today will be grandparents one day. And these things are slow progress, but they are generational mile markers for healing. And so I think big picture down the road, when I'm long gone and hopefully Held Hope is still in existence, that there are people who can look back and say, because of Held Hope, I experienced care and I experienced something that I would not have otherwise, that has changed the way that I am a parent or I'm a grandparent, or that I speak to my coworkers, and that there would be, often in businesses we talk about, like these like KPIs and things like that, about these really objective findings. And I think the coolest thing will be the subjective findings, where people's lives were changed not because we spent a couple $100 on their copays, but because of the care that they received, that now
For
generations
sure.
are healed like because of that care.
Last question. So this show is all about advocating or giving voice to people in the community that are doing really amazing work for the community, like yourself and Held Hope. And so I'm curious to hear who you think is doing really impactful work that maybe doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing comes to mind, especially now that we're going back to school season, is all the teachers. They're the ones who are not only serving their students, but they're also often serving parents and other guardians. They are seeing so much of these mental health experiences on the faces and the works of their kiddos, and they come ready to give all that they have, even their own finances, but their time, their energy, their finances, to just raise up a generation that believes in themselves and believes in others and know kindness and are educated. And it's no light job. It's no light task. And at least all the teachers in my life who I know, they just put on a smile and are just excited to decorate their classrooms and get to work and get to teach in and love it on the students in their community. So I'd say teachers for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Never met a bad band teacher.
Oh, a bad band teacher? I was never in band.
No, but band teachers, just to me, they're the ones that
Yeah.
are
They're
doing
wonderful.
it for love.
I had a really scary choir teacher. He was wonderful, but he was scary.
That's not good.
I feel like I always had I had really great like history, social studies teachers, which is funny because that's like my favorite topic. But like genuinely, they're just like the coolest people. I only had scary math teachers.
Yeah.
I had some scary Spanish teachers.
Ooh, yes.
Foreign language teachers are scary because
Yes.
like you can't really understand what they're saying all the
Absolutely.
time. If you haven't done the homework, they know.
Yeah, that's so true. But they are still advocating for their students.
Yes, they are.
Whether we think they're scary or not.
Or not. Yep. Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you so
guys.
much, Taylor.
All right,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah, it was lovely having you.